Good morning, and thank you for joining us at Finding Female Ancestors, presented by the North Carolina Government and Heritage Library. Can everyone hear me? Okay, thank you. Raising your hand, Beth. um, okay, so again, thank you for joining us at Finding Female Ancestors, presented by the North Carolina Government and Heritage Library, part of the State Library of North Carolina and the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. I am Rebecca Hyman, Educational Programs and Outreach Librarian, and I will be your host and will assist our presenter, Genealogical Research Librarian, Kay Tilson. Before we begin, just a few things. The session will be recorded and will be available for viewing on our YouTube channel, as you see the URL right there. You'll notice on the left-hand side of the screen where it lists participants and hosts, I am Jackie today. I don't have my own account, so Jackie equals Rebecca. If you're having trouble with your sound, please use the audio wizard in Adobe Connect to check your settings. At the top of your screen, click on Meeting, then choose Audio Setup Wizard to run the wizard. If that doesn't work, just exit the program and try again. You will not need a microphone for this webinar. All communications can go through the chat box. Please keep questions until the end of the presentation. We will have time to do it then. But if you have any issues with other things, just let me know in the chat. So today's speaker is Kay Tilson. She's a genealogical research librarian at the North Carolina Government and Heritage Library. Kay is a native North Carolinian and has traced her ancestors back to the mid-1700s in North Carolina. So I'm going to turn it over to Kay, and thank you again for joining us.
Again, welcome to this webinar, shared as part of our library celebration of Women's History Month 2017. Do you have an elusive Emmeline or a phantom Phoebe whose maiden name is left blank on your family tree? Perhaps you have a female ancestor whose parents you just cannot identify. Researching female ancestors can be a challenging task for genealogists. Challenging, but one of the most important to help trace family lines to previous generations. Genealogists of past generations often neglected their female ancestors, listing them only by their first names on pedigree charts and only approximate date of birth and death. This neglect of one half of your genetic ancestors is not acceptable. It was your female ancestors who were the teachers, nurses, and bearers of future generation. The females on your family tree are the ones who kept the family's records and customs and passed those to future generations. About Genealogy published their listing of the 10 most common mistakes made by family historians, and, not surprisingly, one of those was overlooking the name of your female ancestors. It's just too easy to think of our female ancestors only by their family names. Today, North Carolina law allows every adult, female and male, single or married, the right to own property and to decide what to do with it. Everything a female owns before her marriage remains hers. Whatever she earns, buys, or inherits during the marriage remains hers. But the laws have not always been like that. Our North Carolina female ancestors have achieved many great things. We cannot effectively document our ancestors unless we begin to understand the legal status, nor can we truly appreciate their accomplishments unless we understand the obstacles they had to overcome. One of the biggest obstacles for our North Carolina female ancestors were the laws of this colony and this state. English common law was carried to our colony by the early immigrants. Common law was based on ancient government principles and customs, judicial theory, and court affirming judgments. Under this system, a woman had no legal rights in her marriage, and her husband controlled everything, including the property she herself brought into the marriage. Married women in colonies like North Carolina are difficult to find in early legal dealings because they were not allowed to engage in contracts without their husband's approval. Early deeds for married couples often give you the name of the husband with either no mention of his wife or only her first name. If your female ancestor was with
Hi, everyone. Let's just take a moment and we're going to try to figure out the sound with Kay's audio and we'll start over. So I apologize for the issues. So we'll just be one moment. We're going to have Kay just test out her microphone.
Thank you. We certainly appreciate your patience. It's a lovely spring morning in North Carolina this morning. I hope it is where you are. Thank you. That static was horrible. Again, may I welcome you to this webinar shared as part of our library's celebration of Women's History Month 2017. Do you have an elusive Emmeline or a phantom Phoebe whose maiden name is left blank on your family tree? Perhaps you have a female ancestor whose parents you just cannot identify. Researching females, excuse me, thank you. Researching female ancestors can be a challenging task for we genealogists. Challenging, but one of the most important to help you trace family lines to previous generations. Genealogists of past generations often neglect their female ancestors, listing them only by their first name on a pedigree chart with an approximate date of birth and death. This neglect of one half of all your genetic ancestors is not acceptable. After all, it was our female ancestors who were the teachers, nurses, and the bearers of future generations. The females on your family tree are the ones who kept the family's customs and records and passed those to future generations. About Genealogy published their listing of 10 common research errors made by family historians. Not surprisingly, one of those is overlooking the maiden name of female ancestors. It's just too easy for our female ancestors to only be listed by their married names. Today, Today, North Carolina laws allows every female, male and male, single or married, the right to own property and to decide what to do with it. Everything a female owns before her marriage remains hers. Whatever she earns, buys, or inherits during her marriage remained hers. But the laws have not always been like that. Our North Carolina female ancestors have achieved a great many things. Our North Carolina female ancestors have achieved a great many things. We cannot effectively document our female ancestors unless we understand their legal status, nor can we truly appreciate their accomplishments unless we understand the obstacles they had to overcome. One of the biggest obstacles for our female North Carolina ancestors were the laws of this colony and state. English common law was carried to our colonies by the early immigrants. Common law was based on ancient government principles and customs, judicial theory, and court affirming judgments. Under this system, a woman had no legal rights in a marriage, and her husband controlled everything, including the property she herself brought into the marriage. Marriage women in colonies like North Carolina are difficult to find in early legal dealings because they were not allowed to engage in a contract without their husband's approval. Early deeds for married couples may only give you the name of the husband with no mention of his wife or only call her first name. If your female ancestor was widowed, divorced, however, you may find her conducting her own land transactions. For more than 200 years, equality of the sexes under the law did not exist. It may help you to better understand this period of our history if you remember it was the men who made the laws. Thus, the laws were made to favor men. It was the men who owned the land, owned the businesses, and entered into contracts. Between 1663 and 1868, the law considered a husband and wife to be one person, and that one person was the husband. That is why today, by tradition, a bride may take her husband's family name. North Carolina law certainly extended well beyond family names. Un- oh, have you turned? Please excuse this interruption. Technical difficulties again. We're going to need to change computers. I promise we'll be back with you, and those female ancestors will remain just where they are.
Can you just test it?
Yes, I can. Good morning. Are you with us again? Or am I with you?
So for this purposes, now you're joking.
The obstacles we're overcoming are absolute nothing to those of your female ancestor and the things that she endured. May I begin again with women and the laws of North Carolina. Today's North Carolina laws allow every adult, female and male, single or married, the right to own property and to decide what to do with it. Every female, the things she owned before her marriage remain hers. Whatever she earns, buys, or inherits through the marriage remain hers. But the laws did not then like this. Our North Carolina females have achieved many great things. We cannot effectively document our female ancestors unless we begin to understand their legal status, nor can we truly appreciate their accomplishments unless we understand the obstacles they had to overcome. One of the biggest obstacles for our North Carolina female ancestors were the laws of this colony and state.
English common law was carried to our colony by the early immigrants. Common law was based on ancient governing principles and customs, judicial theory, and court-affirming judgments. Under this system, a woman had no legal rights in a marriage. Her husband controlled everything, including the property she herself brought into the marriage. Married women in colonies like North Carolina are difficult to find in early legal dealings because they were not allowed to engage in contracts without their husband's permission. Early deeds for married couples may only give you the name of the husband with either no mention of his wife or only her first name. If your female ancestor is widowed or divorced, however, you may be able to find her conducting her own land business. For more than 200 years, equality for the sexes under the law did not exist. It may help you to better understand this period in history if you remember that it was the men who made the laws. Thus, the laws favored the men. It was the men who owned the land, owned the businesses, and entered into contracts. Between 1663 and 1868, the law considered a husband and wife to be one person, and that one person was the husband. That is why, even today, by tradition, a bride may take her husband's family name. North Carolina law certainly extended well beyond the family name. Unless the couple had formally agreed before the marriage, the law gave most of a woman's belongings and all of her property rights to her husband at their marriage. Albert Coates, in his books By Her Bootstraps, The Saga of Women in North Carolina, describes marriage as the greatest property conveyance in English history. Common law transfers most, if not all, of her land, chattel, and choices in action to her husband. A husband could control his wife's property. He could collect the debts owed to her and keep the money. Anything she earned or inherited during their marriage, except for land, belonged to him. Anything her father willed her belonged to him. As you know, property was wealth for your ancestors. A woman's husband had control over all the land his wife owned before they married, and any she inherited during the marriage. He could not sell her land without her permission, but neither could she sell her land without his permission. He could, however, rent the land, collect the money, and keep it. He could build a house on it, or he could burn down all the buildings that were owned her land. As soon as it was announced that your female ancestor intended to marry, she could not sell any of her own real estate or valuable personal possessions without that future husband's permission. If your female ancestor's husband owned debts, her personal things could be taken by his creditors for his debts. A wife had a right to a decent place to live, but she was required to live in the house her husband provided. If the wife left their home without her husband's permission, he could have the sheriff bring her back, then file kidnapping charges against anyone she stayed with, even her own father. North Carolina genealogist Helen Leary sums up the civil status of married women under common law when she writes, "The wife's civil status closely parallels that of idiots, paupers, lunatics, and minor children." Looking on the positive side, the law that limited the freedom of your married woman also protected her. Women were seldom robbed because they had no money, and rape was even rare because it was punishable by death. Damaging a woman's good name was a felony. A married woman could not be tried for any crimes other than murder and treason because she was under her husband's control. And since her husband was responsible for his wife's good behavior, he could, under the law, punish his wife if she provoked him. As late as 1874, a North Carolina County Superior Court ruled that no court should interfere with a man's responsibility to discipline his wife or his children. In the mid-1800s, 3 attempts to prosecute cases of wife-beating for criminal battery were brought to North Carolina Supreme Court. In all 3 cases, the husband was acquitted. In 1868, North Carolina Supreme Court used the rule of thumb in a case of a husband beating his wife and found in the ruling that no criminal court ought to exercise jurisdiction over such trifling domestic complaints, which only caused the wife temporary pain unless the battery was so gross as to cause her permanent injury or destroy her capacity to fulfill her conjugal duties. This decision was cited as late as 1933. Under the rule of thumb, English law allowed a man to beat his wife with a stick so long as it was no thicker than his thumb. Change was slow, but the laws of North Carolina did change. North Carolina was a common law state until 1868, when our state rewrote its constitution. The new state constitution recognized wives as individuals, separate and apart from their husbands, and entitled to own their own property. By 1960, that's only 57 years ago, new laws began to allow married women, and by extension all adult women, the kind of freedoms that today we take for granted. After 300 years, all women could make their own decisions about their lives and their properties. During her lifetime, each of your female ancestors played many different roles. Sometimes she played more than one of these roles at the same time. These different roles affect the different record groups you will need to search as you look for her maiden name. She may have been a wife, mother, sister, aunt, and grandmother simultaneously. Pick a timeline of each female ancestor and include all the different roles. Seeing these overlapping roles on the timeline will alert you to look at different record groups for different times in her life's history. In 1624, John Donne wrote, "No man is an island." This certainly applied equally to our female ancestors. In 1783, Latin adventurer and international Don Juan concluded that North Carolina women are somewhat reserved, though once their friendship is gained, they were agreeable and charming. Those who marry observe a monastic seclusion and such submission to her husband as he had never seen. Their lifestyle is totally domestic, as they separate themselves from all friendships and center their attention entirely upon the care of their home and family. But perhaps it was the American historian and primary voice for the conservative women's movement, known for her writing about women and society in the antebellum South, who tells us, when working with women in history, pay attention to the other women in their society as well as the men. One reason female ancestors are difficult to trace may be the sources we typically use in genealogy are not necessarily the best for our pre-20th century female ancestors. Because we genealogists rely primarily on government documents, it should come as no shock that women are not well represented there. As you consider your female ancestors, think about the activities she may have been involved in that would result in records or documents. For example, utilize city directories that will assist you in learning what membership societies she could have belonged to. What church did she attend? She may have been a member of a benevolent society for the church that could have resulted in membership records or even a fundraising project such as a cookbook or a signature quilt. Broadening your research field is especially important for finding the maiden name of your female ancestors. Include that cluster of people that were part of your female ancestor's daily life, such as her extended family members and friends, her associates, and her neighbors. It is equally important to take into account the fan club of the important men in her life, that is, the family and friends, associates, and neighbors of her husband, her father, her brothers and brother-in-laws, her sons and son-in-laws, and her uncles. When searching for female ancestors, maiden names for our pre-1900 females and clues to their parents, many professionals share an opinion of the best places to begin your search. Here is a fairly standardized listing of those sources. And may I add one more, your family archives. I thought it would be helpful and interesting to show how effective these sources can be in getting to know your female ancestors. Using the resources found in our library and in the State Archives of North Carolina, I have gathered some examples of these top places for documenting our female ancestors and linking them to earlier generations. Some of these resources will allow you to get to know your females as people. Recommended source number 1 is marriage records. In 1868, North Carolina started requiring that all couples have a marriage license to marry. Here you see the January 30th, 1936 New Hanover County, North Carolina marriage license of Thomas Bryson and Grace Whitehead. On the right-hand side of the license by Grace Whitehead's name, you see the three-letter word May Holt. This three-letter word indicates the maiden name of a married woman, the surname to which a person was born. Next, we see her age and race. Then we find that she is the daughter of A.J. Holt and Mary S. Holt, both living in Henderson, North Carolina. At the bottom of the page is an image of their marriage certificate. They were married the first day of January 1936 in St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church. Look for the church records. Both witnesses to their marriage were females, and both were residents of Wilmington. These two females can now be added to Grace's fan club. North Carolina did and does recognize marriage as a civil contract. As a legal contract, it can be broken, but only through lawful means. By the end of the Revolutionary War, until 1834, only our state's General Assembly had the power to grant a divorce. Here we see the Mary Gregory's petition. In her petition, Mary Gregory is addressing the petition to the Honorable General Assembly of North Carolina. Mary contends in part the conduct of her husband, Edmund Gregory, and I quote, to whom in an unlucky moment she had united herself. She goes on to say, he, Mr. Gregory, has evidenced such total want of regard for her, and so little desire to acquire support, or even to preserve that which she, by her own industry, had prior to marriage, and is in part now possessed, that she feels it is her duty, one she owes to herself, but not only to herself, to a far greater degree to the child in whom she now centers all of her hopes and desire, to apply to your honorable body for relief. She was told that he, Mr. Gregory, her husband, possessed an amiable temper, but the most abusive language and treatment are the only proofs he has ever offered to her. She was informed that he was industrious and that he was wealthy, but alas, instead of riches, he owns not a cent, and, what is still worse, much of the property that she had had before their marriage has been already wasted to satisfy claims owned by him prior to their marriage. The balance is in danger of the same fate under these and like circumstances. Paraphrasing Mary's petition that goes on for 2 more legal-sized pages, in which she asked the state legislature to pass an act granting her petition and protecting her property in the future. The North Carolina General Assembly's Committee on Divorce and Alimony recommended the legislature grant these petitions for divorce on the 19th of December, 1808. The petitioners include Mary Gregory of Edgecombe County. Under our state's constitutional reforms of 1835, divorces were no longer filed in the state's General Assembly, but as a civil suit in the county's Superior Court of Law and Equity. This folder, found in the State Archives of North Carolina, contained a lengthy series of affidavits by the petitioner and the defendant of he said, she said. In this sworn statement by the petitioner, Amanda R. Cass, to the fall term of court 1876, she states, before the death of her first child, she left the home and returned to the home of her father, Hugh R. Williams, in a neighboring county. In that same archives folder, I found the county Superior Court's ruling 2 years later. The ruling ordered, adjudged, and decreed that the nuptials between Amanda R. Cass and Ezekiel Benjamin Cass be herefore dissolved, and that the Amanda R. Cass be divorced from the bond of matrimony. But it goes on, and that the said Amanda R. Cass from henceforth, to all intents and purposes, be a femme sole. This court decree empowered her to buy, sell, and hold property independent of her husband, and that the said Ezekiel be cast pay unto Amanda Arkhouse the sum of $350 as alimony. The second source of finding female ancestors and their maiden names is the tombstone. Sadly, the cemetery may be the only place to find real evidence that some women lived. A woman hidden in her father's household during her growing years and recorded in pre-1850 censuses only as a female in a certain age category may be located under her surname for the very first time on her headstone. If your female ancestor died in childbirth, then the child is usually buried with her or next to her. If the cemetery is located at church, be sure to check the church's burial and funeral records as well. Here you see the tombstone of David Ira Fort and his wife, located in Oakwood Cemetery, just a few blocks from our library. What a beautiful job this family did in sharing information with future descendants. You not only see David Ira Fort's full name and the dates of his birth and death, you have the names of his parents, including the maiden name of his mother. Sharing the plot with David is his wife. Here you see the date they married, not only the maiden name of his wife, but the names of her parents, and including the maiden name of her mother. While you're at the cemetery making pictures of your ancestors' tombstones, be very careful. When you step in any direction, chances are you will be standing on the head of another ancestor or one of her siblings. Check nearby plots for members of your ancestors' female cemetery neighborhood. This is a shot of the 1880 census from the Tarboro Township, Edgecombe County, North Carolina. Here on page 33, we see household 369. Near the bottom of the page is Victor Howard. He is a male, mulatto, 23 years old. He is married and a clerk in a grocery store. Below him we see Mary Howard, a female, black, 21, wife. She's married and she's keeping house. On the third line of this household enumeration, I see Cora Howard, a mulatto, female, age 1, and she's the daughter. But there's one more member of this household. On the last line enumerated is Eliza Baker, a black, female, age 60, widowed, and mother-in-law. Eliza Baker, we now know, is the mother of his wife Mary. The 1880 census was the first to report relationships of the head of the household. But not the only census that can give us clues. This is a page from the 1860 North Carolina census in the lower division of Wilkes County. Remember our Amanda and Ezekiel Benjamin? Here in family number 1020, we see the pre-divorce census record of Ezekiel Benjamin Cass. We find Ezekiel B. Cass, head of the household, age 30, a male farmer. Just below him is listed that first child Amanda mentioned in her divorce petition, Dorcas Cass, 4-year-old female. On the next line we see Rufus Cass, 2-year-old male. Completing this listing in the household members are 3 male laborers. 26-year-old Amanda was enumerated in the household of her father, Hugh R. Williams, in neighboring Iredell County. Allow me please to enlarge the portion of the page containing the household 1020 of Ezekiel Benjamin Cass, and let's look a bit at his neighborhood. Right next door in household 1021, we see the 46-year-old widow Elizabeth Nicholson, a farmer, and her household, made of 23-year-old female Abigail, 21-year-old Mary Elizabeth, 6-year-old female Mary, and 4-year-old Rachel. Earlier I mentioned the importance of your ancestors' neighborhood. 21-year-old Mary Elizabeth will become Ezekiel's second wife. While here, please remember with me that all of widow Elizabeth Nicholson's household is female. The next source, number 4, mentioned for finding records of your female ancestors and their families is land records. Land records are of great value to genealogy research. They give you evidence of where your ancestors lived, and for how long they lived in a locality, at least the given name of a wife, and sometimes a surprising amount of detailed and genealogical information about your female ancestors. Here you see the record of deed of Philip Earnhardt to his 10 children. That include, for example, Elizabeth Earnhardt, Isaac Earnhardt, James Montgomery and his wife Lee, plus the 8 children of my daughter Christine Troutman and her husband Thomas Troutman. And he goes ahead and names all of those children. Going on, he names Daniel Wagner and his wife Christine, John Wagner and his wife Margaret, James M. Reed and his wife Mary. This tract of land includes a gold mine. During the genealogy of the land held by Christine Troutman and her husband Thomas, we would uncover this deed of gift by her father, Philip Earnhardt. Let's look now, please, at the February 18, 1841 Edgecombe County deed. This deed begins, whereas a marriage has been agreed upon and is about to be solemnized between Philip A.R.C. Cahoon and Martha E. Sutton, the above said are desirous that the property now belonging to Martha and herefore mentioned shall be conveyed to the said Thomas C. Hearn, all the rights and interests. And they list the property that includes and named here 7 slaves and their increase. Also some personal property. And it is to be held in trust for Mary Sutton, the daughter of Elizabeth E. and her late husband William Sutton, held separate and free from the control and ownership of A.R.C. Cahoon, the whole of the slaves and their increase and other property, so that the same is in no way subject to the debts of Philip A.R.C., and from and after her, Mary Martha E.'s death, shall be conveyed absolutely and in fee simple the whole of the said slaves and their increase and other property, and he again mentioned to Mary Sutton, daughter of Martha E. and the late William Sutton. The deed goes on to tell what should happen to the slaves and personal property if Mary, the daughter, dies without leaving issue. Church records are our source number 5. Quakerism was the dominant religion in early North Carolina. Quakers were here before the Anglican bishops. The Rich Square Monthly Meeting in Northampton County, North Carolina, was organized in 1750 by the authority of the Eastern Quarterly Meeting. Besides the large body of friends in the community of Rich Square, the monthly meeting included members in Edgecombe and Hertford counties. Here, from the court minutes of the Rich Square Monthly Meeting, we have Roger Blanchard marrying Sarah J. Sarah was born January the 18th, 1862. Sarah is the daughter of Elijah and Margaret Outlaw. Their daughter Delilah married Henry J. Purvis. Delilah Purvis was the daughter of Roger and Sarah Blanchard. Sarah, her mother's maiden name, was Outlaw. Sarah was the daughter of Elijah and Margaret Outlaw. This single church record identifies the surname of 2 generations of females. The 6th important resource mentioned in that listing was probate records. Here you see the will of William Ryan of Guilford County. Mr. Ryan begins his will by identifying himself of Guilford County, North Carolina, then comments on his mental condition, saying he is of sound mind and memory, and acknowledges the uncertainty of his earthly existence. He states this is his last will and testament in names that follow. Item 1, William Ryan asks that his executors provide him a decent burial, and that they pay his funeral expenses and all his just debts. Item 2, he says, I give and bequeath to my eldest daughter, Jane Denny, wife of William Denny, 225 acres of land and the place on which I now live. William Ryan goes on to describe this land in metes and bounds. He gives Jane and the heirs of her body certain items of furniture and one of his medical books and one half of his moral books. By researching the land, doing the genealogy of the land's ownership, a researcher would find this plot of land owned by William Denny and his wife Jane, no last name, was inherited from her father, William Ryan, and that Jane, by birth order, was the eldest daughter. William Ryan continues in his will, giving property to his granddaughter, identifying her by her first name and the name of her husband. Not every ancestor left a will. Here is the probate of Isaac Money Administrator for Joseph Myers, deceased. Because the probate record has an administrator, we know that Joseph Myers died with something of value, but no valid will. This petition describes a parcel of land to be divided between the deceased Joseph Myers' children, listing in part John Myers, Thomas Myers, John Robertson and his wife Nancy, and going on. By tracing the ownership of the land held by John Ryan and Robertson and his wife Nancy, we genealogists will discover the name of her father, thus her maiden name. The seventh source missing in that list of good locations was newspapers. Newspapers were your female ancestors' Facebook before February of 2004. As you are seeing, the government records did not always give us all we want to know about our female ancestors' lives. They provide us only limited genealogy information and certainly no family history data needed to bring your female ancestors to life. Fortunately, there is a good source of information about women, members of our family, old newspapers. Historical newspapers document the lives of common people, their everyday events and special occasions. This is true for both men and women on your family tree. From the September 16, 1834 Allegheny County, North Carolina newspaper, we learn of the recent marriage of Miss Rebecca S. Pitt, daughter of Colonel Joseph Pitt, to Louis Belcher, and the death of 18-year-old Margaret Edwards, daughter of Mr. Brian Edwards. Note these daily events that were reported by the Tarboro Daily Southerner on Thursday, September the 2nd, 1920. These gossipy bits aid researchers finding information that may lead to expanding their elusive female fan club. Why, for example, did Miss S. C. Clark and Miss Virginia Bellamy go to Waynesville? What was there? What is their relationship? What was their common interest in Waynesville? Why did they travel 355 miles away in 1920? The eighth source mentioned that we should look at were death certificates. Death certificates are another public record, highly sought by family historians. North Carolina's death certificate is both a primary and a secondary source of information. As a record of death, the information found on the right-hand portion concerning the death is primary, gathered from and recorded at the time of the event. Here we see the death certificate for Mary Elizabeth Cass, that second wife of Ezekiel B. Cass. The information found on the right-hand side, giving the date and cause of her death, are accurate based on the knowledge of Dr. L.P. Summers. The place of death and interment are contemporary with the event, thus a primary source. The personal information, though, located on the left side of the certificate is secondary and only as accurate as the informer's knowledge of the events and the recorder's accurate transcription of what he is told. The information here was given by the son of Mary. He certainly was not present at her birth to know that William Nicholson and Elizabeth Rash were her parents. He reported, or it was recorded, that she was married, when actually her only documented husband was Ezekiel B. Cass, and he had been dead for more than a decade. The family information is hints to guide our research. It is the researcher who is responsible for proving or disproving the information about her birth, educational level, and marital status, as reported here by her son. And source number 9 was military records. There has not been a time in our colony and state's history when we did not have a military. Your ancestors may not own land, but military service for centuries was not voluntary. Your missing ancestor may be recorded in military records. Here we see a portion of the widow Rebecca Aaron's application for her husband's Revolutionary military pension after his death. We see from Rebecca Aaron's affidavit, her sworn statement to the court, She testified under an oath that she married William Aaron in Franklin County, Georgia, November the 3rd, 1829, and that her last name before marriage was Rebecca Rudd. We have a location, we have a date of marriage, and we have her maiden name. We know from William Aaron's original application he served with the 10th Virginia Regiment, Continental Line. It is now the researcher's responsibility to prove the statements made by this 71-year-old widow are true. The court was satisfied with the truth of her sworn statement. They granted her her widow's pension for her husband's service. The researcher has things easier because we can begin here in Whitfield County, Georgia, migrating back to Franklin County, Georgia, where they were married, and begin looking for that marriage record. When searching for records of your female ancestor, it is necessary that you search for all the different names your female ancestors were called, or could have been called, remembering nicknames that were popular during her lifetime. For example, most Marys were called Polly, and most Marthas Patsy during the late 17th and through the 1800s. Consider the naming patterns of your ancestors. Our immigrant ancestors from all countries tend to name their children after other family members. You may find your immigrant ancestors from European countries naming their firstborn son after his father's father. The second son was named after his mother's father. The third son was named after his father, and the fourth son may have been named after his father's eldest brother. The first daughter was named after her mother's mother, the second daughter after the father's mother, and the third daughter after the mother, the fourth daughter after the mother's eldest sister. This pattern of naming was practiced through most of the 1800s. Middle names can also be wonderful clues to ancestry. Does your female child have a surname as a middle name? You remember we looked at the death certificate of Mary Elizabeth Nicholson Cass, second wife of divorced Ezekiel Benjamin Cass on the 1850 census. Mary was enumerated as a next-door neighbor of Ezekiel in the household of her mother, Elizabeth Nicholson. From the census enumeration, we saw that the widow Elizabeth and her husband William Nicholson had only girls, leaving no sons to carry that Nicholson surname to future generations. Mary Elizabeth and Ezekiel Cass had many children, as did their peers. Their daughters, Pauline, Elizabeth, Mary, and Emmeline, were given the surname Cass, the surname of their father. However, all of their sons were given Mary Elizabeth's first surname, Nicholson. Their surnames, Leander, Abel, Joseph, and Louis, all had the surname Nicholson. Ezekiel Cass had many brothers. Mary Elizabeth Nicholson had only sisters and no one to perpetuate the Nicholson family name. It was their mother's hope that the sons of her sons would carry the Nicholson family name into the future. And source number 11, Family Archives. Genealogy is all about family. Your genealogy research should begin at home or in the home of an older family member who cares for all those family treasures. Enjoy those treasures you will find in your family member's dusty old attic. Each item saved was thought to be important by a member of your family's preceding generations. And remember to interview and record older living relatives before time can steal their memories or their lives. You may find a family Bible, old photographs, diaries, journals, and newspaper clippings among these treasures. The North Carolina's digital collection is a project of the State Library of North Carolina and the State Archives. There is a wealth of information on North Carolina, including North Carolina Family Records online. Within this grouping, you will find Bible records from the State Archives collection. You will find an index to names and dates and places of 6-volume series of marriage and death announcements from 5 of North Carolina's newspapers, spanning 1799 to 1893. Cemetery records are found here, and some family histories that are out of copyright. Doing a locational chart of this digital records online collection, For Edgecombe County, I found the Hinton Family Bible. The Hinton Bible was copyright dated 1818. On that Bible's page for recording the family's marriages, we see that Charles L. Hinton and Anne Perry were married the 17th of December, 1820. From that same Bible on the page recording family deaths, we see that Anne Perry Hinton, wife of Charles Hinton, departed this life December the 22nd, 1832, just 12 years and 5 days after her marriage. The life of each of your female ancestors is important and should be researched and documented. Don't give up. Researching women takes time, patience, and creativity, but your efforts will be well rewarded. You are now seeing our State Library's web page. As you see from the notice at the top of our page, the State Library of North Carolina is now redesigning its website to create the best possible experience for you, our users. From this site, you can access our library's catalog that includes all the resources we hold. You can find links to our reference service and our digital collections. You can access handouts, research guides, and instructional videos that support your family history research. We enjoy helping you discover your ancestry, augment your knowledge of North Carolina history, demographics, and your understanding of the laws and statutes of our colony and state. We can assist you in person, remotely via phone, email, or online chat. We offer a free book a librarian service, giving researchers 30 minutes of a professional librarian's uninterrupted attention to respond to your research concerns. The Government Heritage Library has online videos and tutorials on our website and YouTube channel. Please check out to learn something new or if you need a refresher on genealogy research. Some of the items you find includes an introduction to genealogy and family history research. This one is an online course developed by the Government Heritage Library and Wake Forest University's Z. Smith Reynolds Library. Or check out some of our short video tutorials. On YouTube, we are always adding to this collection. Our latest edition includes using North Carolina's cohabitation records and researching female ancestors. Stay connected with us via our social media accounts. We post genealogy tips, interesting North Carolina facts, event information, and so much more. Here's our contact information as well if you have any questions. Thank you for letting us be part of your quest to name and document your female ancestors. Please take a moment to fill out our survey. We would love your feedback. The link is on the screen. We have saved the link to your questions. During the remaining time, let's see if some of your research concerns, and perhaps we can play a part in helping you with those.
Thank you, Kay. Hi, this is Rebecca. Can you hear me? I hope. Okay, so we're gonna do some questions. Okay, there's just something with this microphone. Okay. Hi, so it's Rebecca, and we're just gonna be passing the mic back and forth. There's something wrong with our other machine, so I apologize for that. So we had a question about, do you know when North Carolina birth, death, and marriage records began? And so that was 1913, is that correct? 1913 is when the 1st of October, 1913. I was not there.
Marriage records began much earlier.
Right, and Kay just said marriage records began, I believe it was 1868. And the other question was, is there any available list of dates by county when existing records were destroyed by fire or other means? There is, and we can send out that list. Also, if you can, I can send out a link to the state archives has their index for county records. And in that book, there's information about when the county started collecting records, as well as when things were destroyed. Another question was about doing the naming, listing out the naming patterns for female, for maiden names and things like that. We will list that as well. I should have everyone's email address, and I will send that out in a follow-up email to you. And I can also, thanks Beth, I can also post it on our social media sites if you link to us that way. Okay, there's another question. How can I find local newspapers contemporary with my ancestors and location? For example, Hayesville, 1888. Well, we do, another link I'll put, is we have a source called the North Carolina Newspaper Locator, and that reflects our holdings at the state library. And so we can search by location, so county or town or title of newspaper, and we can do an exact date or a date range. And then we can send you the newspapers through our interlibrary loan service, and you can look at them on your end at your local library, or you can join us here in Raleigh. Okay, hopefully that answers that question. Funeral homes were mentioned as having records. If those funeral homes close, what usually happens to those records? I don't know, okay?
May I suggest that you contact the local history librarian at the public library serving the area where your ancestor lived. Sometimes those records are turned over to other funeral homes and can be found that way. Funeral home records are private records. They would not be part of a public collection in a place like our State Archives of North Carolina. All right. We certainly appreciate your patience with us today. May I promise you the difficulties we had do not compare with the difficulties of your female ancestors as they traveled through life and created future generations.
The North Carolina Newspaper Locator, but I will include everything in the email that I'll send you. This is Rebecca again. So thank you for your patience with our audio issues. We tested it yesterday, so we have recorded this and we'll clean it up, and I'll send everyone a link to the recording as well. It will be on our YouTube channel shortly, and we will probably do this again, of course with the female ancestors, but we look forward to doing more webinars. So please take our survey. And does anyone have any other questions? And yes, thanks again for joining us, and again for being patient. Okay. Okay, well, if there's no more questions, I will send out an email to everyone. If I don't have your email address, please go back to register in the link that I put up earlier in the chat box, and I'll get it that way. If not, everyone have a wonderful